Okay, C Higgins, Rail Pass. You want to watch the intro if you want to know some of the history, my history with the game, at least the beginning of it. Then I go into the rules, and those aren't too important. All right. So this is funny because quite a few times I've run across games that I really, really wanted to like. And I'd read the rules, and then when I got around to playing them, they just weren't any fun. You know, and it ends up hard to tell, it's missing something, whatever. This one's the opposite. It's not that I didn't want to like it, but after reading the rules, my first impression was there's no game here, and that's correct. It required a correction to the rules that's online. Or, well, a clarification in the sense that there was an omission that, without that, the game just doesn't work at all. So make sure you check that. It's, if you stop, you have to stop at a city in order to pick up a rail pass there from that location. You can't just pick them up anywhere from the and the first, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of my first playthrough video, I'm trying to figure out how players want to start. Because they're coming out of Chicago, and there's so many railways, and then, I don't want to damage the board, but the Chicago region is filled with other railways nearby. And basically each player has a humongous number of choices, and nothing really to inform those choices. They don't have any prior holdings or anything like that. So it becomes this massively complex problem first thing off the game. And I don't know how terribly important it is what your first pick is to do. It doesn't seem tremendously vitally important, but it can guide your move, and you feel like you want to optimize that. And it just, you feel like you're facing this most obscene problem. But once you get past the first couple moves, everything kind of falls into place. And the decisions become not trivial, but easier. You're given just a couple of choices, and one of them may work with what you're doing, one of them may suggest a strategy that, given other players' actions, could be useful. It's not like you're given choices that no longer really matter once you made that first choice. No, you're given plenty of opportunities to make both tactical and strategic decisions within the game after that first move. And they're all within a context that now makes sense. But when you first start playing, you're just standing there saying, what the hell do I do? So this is one of the first times I think I've played a game. I've played games that grew on me a little bit, but this one just went from being an apparent nightmare to actually quite a bit of fun. And usually when a game wins me over, it wins me over not just emotionally or however you want to put it, not just from my enjoyment, but it wins me over intellectually. This one's not done that at all. I still don't particularly think that this is my type of game. And the reason for that is, at heart, it's still this tremendously complicated optimization problem. And games that are optimization problems, even if they're fluid ones with with moving parts based on the players, don't tend to thrill me too much. But this one was complex enough that I could look at it and say, I ain't going to figure it out. Now, maybe you will eventually be able to analyze it. And just because I can't figure it out doesn't mean nothing can. Which is to say, I suspect that this game, someone could write a simple computer program, the hard part being representing the map and the information in the game in it. But the AI for such a game, if the representation of the data was decent, wouldn't be too hard. It wouldn't be a solvable type situation. You can't use like a min-max on it, but you could use a modified one with a heuristic, and I think it would probably beat most players because it could run all those calculations quickly, and I don't think players are going to be willing to do that. And that could be a big negative against it, but I don't mind that. I don't mind that as long as players can't. Now, to some extent, players can, and I'm kind of thinking maybe the game requires either people who don't give a shit too much about winning. They want to win, but they're not willing to, invest 20 minutes each turn to figure out their optimal possible move. Or put a little time limit on it. You got a minute to take your move. That seems pretty reasonable. And once you put any time limit on it of any reasonable length, it becomes obvious that you can't overthink it anymore. You can't calculate everything out. And I think that might be necessary for me to have the kind of enjoyment that I had playing in solitaire, because I basically said, okay, I'm going to just make a best effort to make a good move each time, but I'm not going to calculate out everything. Okay. There were other issues with the game. One is the component quality, the components itself. Not the quality so much, although there are some small issues there. But in terms of aspects like rails that aren't connected that I think should be, according to what the cards appear to show, sometimes cards not showing what's on the map properly, and certainly a difficulty in discerning what's actually going on, what you can reach on this map on the cards, which don't have an exact representation of the map on them. In some cases, they have to abstract away areas, and that's not made clear in the rules. The rules are really, really terrible. There's other stuff that's missing that can make the game very helpful. Some play aids that I went over in the wrap. Probably the biggest play aids, well, the two play aids that I thought would be most useful is a somewhat shrunk down map that you can color in which connections you hold. That's only important for the advanced game. Which ones you could freely travel over. Because you end up with so many rails and they're just this pile, and it's really hard to assess where you have the capability to move for free and where you don't. More important for the basic game would be some sort of gazetteer that tells you where everything is, because a lot of the issue in the game is you're trying to hunt down, say, that last electric train that you need, and you have no idea where it is. But you also don't know probably where all the rail nets are going to be. Some of these are lines that are part of conglomerate lines, and that's actually the affiliation. Like the Union Pacific has 2 different rails as part of it. The Southern Pacific has 7 different rails as part of it. Which means you can't be absolutely sure, hey, where the headquarters for the main part of the Southern Pacific is. It's in San Francisco. Cool. Well, I didn't know that for a long time. Some of the representational issues, these boxes out here, they make it harder to there's no other way to do it, but they make it harder to understand where you are, because some of them are quite far from where they actually sit. This is Cleveland way up here. Chicago, which is over on a different panel of the board, way up here. The board's very busy. It's very easy not to notice, not to realize that whenever you see one of these little circled dots, which look a lot less impressive than the rail symbols, that you have to go hunt down, because there will be multiple companies there. Okay. What did I like? It's really hard to say. I mean, it was just that the actual decision making was in such a complex environment that I would just try to do what felt right, kind of like I do in a war game. I didn't have a terribly, you know, situational reason for doing what I do, like I often do in a war game. I couldn't say, yeah, I want to deploy there. That's a nice hill. I bet you that works well. And then try to figure out how to do it. No, it was more along the lines of, okay, I'm looking for an E. You know, there's an E near me. I want to collect E's. Yeah, that sounds like a good thing. That's the best thing to do. You know, so that I could make decisions with some sort of certainty, at least in my mind, even if they weren't actually there. Let me make sure my power's running. Yay. My camera's so screwed nowadays. Speaking of topicality, although maybe your decisions aren't terribly topically based, with a little bit of hand waving you can understand what the game's about and lay some understanding to why you want to collect sets, because at heart it is a set collecting game in terms of the score. And I go over that in the wrap. But briefly, hey, look, you know, there's certain, you're a supplier of goods to these railroads, of goods and services or whatever. And railroads that share certain similarities will provide you an economy in terms of what you can provide to them. Those similarities, if they're in terms of the actual railroad itself, you know, like is it an electric railroad? Well, it needs generators then of a certain type. There's economies of scale that you can provide, or business relationships if it's all part of one system, one overreaching corporation, which fits the affiliations. The only thing I can get with color is that that's probably paint. Because the color actually kind of fits the color of the logos of the rail cars, whatever, that some of these companies used. That's stretching it a little far, but other than that, we're okay with that. Let's see. In terms of the actual mechanisms, well, at heart, this is a majority set collection game, kind of like a Knizia game. I love Knizia games. Maybe that's why I like it, right? I'm trying to collect... I get points for every card I get. If the card has things like types or affiliations on it, I get an extra point for each of those as well. But if I have the plurality of all across that one type, or that one color, or that one affiliation, I get twice as many points for each of the cards that I get that for. And likewise, if I have absolute every single copy of it, then I get 3 times as much for every single card. Now, only on that particular attribute. So, like, if I've got all the black cards, well, I'd get 32 times 3 for that. But I wouldn't get to multiply, you know, their other affiliations unless I had the plurality or absolute ownership of all of them. So I tend to like that kind of thing, and for scoring for whatever reason. And then the mechanisms to drive the game all kind of make sense in terms of gathering up that scoring, which is you're traveling around on these rails, and as you service companies, they do little favors for you by giving you the ability to travel on their rail for free. Now, in the longest game, the advanced game, whatever, you get to travel their rail for free for the rest of the game. And I chose to play that because I like that kind of building up a setup. But in the basic game, you just get kind of a movement bonus that you must use on the next turn. And that's helpful. It reduces your costs for the next turn. That's the other part of it, which is that each turn you have to pay a set of fixed costs for just, eating, sleeping, phoning home on the telegraph. And then a set of costs associated with your movement. And you can mitigate these costs in different ways. There's assist cards, which will remove your fixed costs, but they're very expensive. The cheapest of them pays off in 15 turns. It's $15 and it saves you $1 each turn. Others can pay off in like 12 turns but don't work everywhere on the map. Let me think about the big one. It's $80 and it saves you $4 a turn. So it pays off in 20 turns, which seems like a lot, but it takes all your fixed costs except for the telegraph off the board. So that's important because you only have a certain limited number of these tokens that give you cash, and you have to hit those. And if you don't have the cash to pay your expenses, basically you're riding around as a hobo or something. And you can't go in and conduct your business under those circumstances until you get to your payday location and you collect a big wad of money, enough to get you to your next payday location, and do some work in between as well if you want. But if you go out and buy a big expensive assist card, you might find yourself running out of cash. The end game also becomes interesting because the game ends when somebody hits their last token, and then you finish up the round and everybody scores their points. And what that means is that the players themselves have a significant amount of control by their play over when they may desire to end the game. So if they set themselves up as one of my players did, so that he can essentially operate without paying any money anymore, he could go on for a long, long time in the game and just collect up more victory points throughout the game. But other players wouldn't be in that position, so they may want to undercut him. But they may also have some catch-up, some tasks that they want to pick up on the board. It's not like it's not like all things are equal in terms of what you get out of your turns. So some people may be set up so that they were kind of needing to pick up additional examples of one color in a particular rail. And what helps drive that and keep people from wanting to end the game is that if someone else is competing with you in that particular attribute, both of you keep getting additional ones in it, and it's like, I can't go for it now, because if I do, even though I'm ahead, he'll be able to go get another one of those, and he'll beat me out, and that's worth a lot of points to me, and that sucks. The more invested you become in this particular set, the more important it is, because of the multiplier, to make damn sure you get that multiplier, right? There's an aspect to the game that I mentioned, sort of a trivia aspect, which is like knowledge of the game, knowledge of where the rail nets go, obviously what attributes they have on them. That all because of No Gazetteer, but also just in general, in order to make your decisions, you have to have this stuff kind of baked into you. Becomes kind of a helpful thing. So for example, if you know that the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe is going to run you from Chicago out west, well, if you can pick that up far enough east and get the rail ticket for it, then in the long game you'll get a number of free rides that'll be useful. You can also use certain railways to take you in one direction and then back the other way and save money that way. There's a lot of little optimizing your play strategies that can be used in this. And they all come with a cost, of course. So if you're running over the same track you went over before, you probably are getting choices that you've already decided were not your optimal choice. Whereas if you're cutting through new territory, you get to investigate, the new railroad, the new companies to service out there, and they may mesh better with your scorecard, because nothing seems to be really geographically located. You're not going to become, the person who services the Northeast and that's it. You've got to cover the whole country, sort of. The winning player in the game I had covered only the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, never left it. Worked out. I was shocked as hell. I still don't quite understand how. Somewhat related to the trivia aspect is that has to be the most exhaustive game I've seen in terms of the lines that it represents. I've seen some things that blow up, a tiny little area to this kind of detail. Some of the 18XX games are over a very small amount of territory. You get things like New England Rails and stuff like that, or Railways of New England, I don't know which one I have, that handle a very small geographical area and cover a lot of the smaller lines. This really fills you with lines. There's just so many cards. Now, these aren't like share cards or something. Every single one of these is a different railway line. Every single one has its associated logo, and its associated rail extent covered on the back of the card. So you've got so much more information than most rail games do about the historical railroads, and that's very exciting. I think that this is the first rail game that I've seen that I would say, if you're like a big North American rail aficionado, and there are a lot of them out there and a lot of them attracted to rail games, you need this game. You just need it for what it is. It's like pulling out your map of rail connections from a certain era and looking at it. And I think you'll also find that it's more fun the more you know about the railroads, because you'll have an idea not only where to find them, but what their extent's going to be, whether or not something's, got certain attributes. This has some rail lines that are just ridiculously small, though, like belt lines around a particular city and such. So it may stretch your knowledge, even if you are really, really a hobbyist in terms of studying rail history. So anyway, for me, this is kind of weird. Like I said, I thought I was going to be miserable after reading the rules and looking at the board and starting to try to figure out my first couple turns. I ended up having a hell of a good time with it. I don't know if that hell of a good time is going to pass by, or if it's going to stay for a while, because as an example, I enjoyed Rail Baron a lot the first time I played it. I asked to borrow it. The guy I asked to borrow it from didn't really know me, and he's like, I don't feel really comfortable with that. So I went out and bought it myself. And within about 3 or 4 playings, it's like, well, okay, that's it. Yeah, but that's just a roll and move game. This is a game, there's strategy in it, there's no question, but that strategy becomes pretty apparent after a couple of plays. I'm not sure this one does. I think this is just such a tangled web of different optimizations possible for you that it may actually have a significant replay value. Now, I don't know if that matters to me. I may tire of this after playing it a couple of times. But I think there's actually an interesting, a game that would be of great interest to certain players. And it certainly provided me with a kind of enjoyment that I didn't expect out of it at all. All right, let's send it up. And for next time, something new published this year, and hopefully I'll be the first person to get it out, right? I got credits in the rule book too. Just a thank you.